Hello, everyone. This is Chris Adams. I'm the president of Balancing Act and one of the co-founders of it. Thank you all for joining us today to go a little bit in depth on one of our favorite features called Meeting Mode. Meeting Mode is a way to turn the Balancing Act simulation into a face-to-face facilitation tool. Our company that created Balancing Act has actually been around since 1998, and for the first 15 years or so of our existence, we specialized in face-to-face public policy meeting facilitation and public engagement on behalf of local governments. And so it was very important for us when we created an online simulation that we try to find a way to use it in face-to-face interactions as well. So that's how we created Meeting Mode, and I think it's a very nice tool to help with face-to-face interaction on the budget. All right, so let me go ahead and begin. Let me also just a way of orienting everybody. You should have a control panel. I think it usually shows up on the right-hand side of your screen, and there's a place for you to raise a hand. So if you have a question and want to ask something, please just go ahead and raise your hand, and I should be able to see it on my control panel, and then I'll unmute you and we can go forward. But I think by default, everybody is muted. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. Okay, the agenda for today is we're just going to look at some really nice photos that were taken by some staff at the City of Kansas City, Missouri. They used Balancing Act a couple of weeks ago, and they had a very good experience with it. Then I'm going to say just a few words about the role of face-to-face meetings doing budget engagement. Even though we have an online simulation, as I said earlier, we think that face-to-face is very valuable, and that actually the technology can be a really nice tool to make face-to-face interactions meaningful. And then we're going to try out Meeting Mode, and then I'm going to give you a quick tutorial on how to set it up. The whole thing will take under 30 minutes. All right. So as we've already talked about, Meeting Mode is something that turns the online simulation into a face-to-face facilitation tool. We think online is great. It gives you the ability to reach hundreds, if not thousands, of people. But sometimes you just need to have that face-to-face interaction so that public officials and residents can have a discussion. In some cases, it might even be used internally with staff to create a budget, to have a high-level staff-level budget conversation, just so that everyone in your organization understands the broad range of things that the public budget spends money on, or even with council members at a budget retreat or something like that. You can use Meeting Mode in groups of anywhere from, I don't know, 3 or 4 to 400. And I think it's a helpful tool for any of those sizes. And the other thing that we think is important is that Meeting Mode creates the opportunity for two-way communication and deliberation. And that's important because very often public engagement doesn't provide an opportunity for discussion. And sometimes the very best decisions are made when there can be an exchange of ideas and people can look at various perspectives and deliberate on it a little bit, and hopefully come out with a better solution, or at least a solution that everyone understands and is able to live with on the other side. All right, these are some photos. As I said, I think these were taken about 2 or 3 weeks ago in Kansas City at one of their budget workshops. And as you can see, people are using a variety of devices. You can use your phone, you can use a laptop, you can use a tablet. The simulation scales to any of those sizes and is actually quite usable. Meeting the unofficial rule of public meetings that you have some food there. You can see a bag of Fritos. There are some. This is a nice picture with some of the professional staff of the city helping residents to understand some of what they're looking at and ask them questions. And here's a broad shot of the room. And then here's one. This is actually at the University of Denver, and it's a big meeting on the Colorado budget. And in that inset photo on the upper left, you can see how it looks on a phone. All right. So, this is a nice quote. This is from about 2 weeks ago. Residents take the simulation very seriously. This is a quote from Kansas City, Missouri budget analyst Adam Blum, and he said, "The amazing thing is that residents are almost silent as they go through the exercise because they are concentrating so hard on making these decisions." I thought that was actually a pretty cool quote, that by giving people this learning opportunity, this engagement opportunity, that they take it very seriously. I think often public officials worry that somebody's going to go in and they're just going to zero things out, and that they're not really going to, or they're just going to select the things that they care about and nothing else. And we just haven't found that to be the case, and especially in a deliberative opportunity where there's other people who might be different from yourself, who might value different things in terms of city or county services. It's just a great way to build up broader understanding. This is it's a tool that we use in our strategy sessions with clients, and I wanted to show it to you. It's sort of a busy tool. I apologize for that. There's a lot going on, but it's a good way of kind of demonstrating when meeting mode might be useful. So meeting mode isn't the tool for everybody. But for folks that are interested in a little bit deeper involvement with residents, I think it's an invaluable tool. So let me just explain this to you briefly. So across the top you see it says inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. Those are possible goals that come from a very useful tool. It's called the IAP2 Public Participation Spectrum. And it's a pretty widely accepted way of just sort of helping public entities to identify what their goal is in terms of doing public engagement. And they just suggest that it could be one of these five, that it should fall in one of these five. And I think it's a pretty useful idea. And what we've done below that, not in the yellow, but below that, we've just sort of talked about how the balancing act tools can fit with that. That second line where it says goal, those actually come from two scholars of public budgeting, Carol Ebdon and Amy Franklin, and they just suggest that generally the goals of a budget office in terms of doing public engagement in the first place are one of these five. So educating and enhancing trust, which correlates with IAP2's public engagement goal of informing. The next one is gaining support, which correlates with IAP2's consult goal, informed decision-making, influence decision-making, and then building political support. And those three to the right, those are the ones that really involve much more discussion. So they're much more about two-way conversation, and they are situations where the public entity is not just looking to inform or even to gain support for a budget proposal, but they really want to use it to help make it. They want that input to be understood. They want it to be in context, and then they want to do something with it. When I first started thinking about the far right one, empowering and building political support, I had a hard time at first thinking of a use case for when that would be a case where a public entity, a city or county or school district would actually want to empower, build public support. And then the obvious came to me that many public entities, by state law or by some other ordinance, need to have voter approval for a tax increase. So if you're a public entity that's experiencing a revenue change, such as a decrease in sales tax, possibly due to online sales, we have a number of counties that we work with that have a lot of energy resources, and because of the falling energy prices, they are experiencing a long-term and significant decrease in revenue, and so they need to educate their residents about that so that they can possibly think of a different revenue source, or so that they can right-size spending so that it fits with the new revenue projections. So that empowering and building political support, that's not just sort of an academic thought experiment. There's a number of our entities, especially in places like California and Colorado, that require voter approval for tax rate increases, where you really need to have 50% plus one of the electorate agreeing with what you're going to be proposing if it's a tax rate increase. So anyway, this is just meant to be a bit of a tool to help you think through when and why meeting mode might be useful. All right, so let's give it a try. And so what I'm going to do is take us to the internet. And the very first budget that we ever started simulating was for the state of Colorado. And so I'm going to use theirs. They've done a really nice job. It's had a few sponsors. Right now it's sponsored by the Colorado Association of School Boards and Great Ed Colorado. The previous sponsor to that was the Governor's Office of State Planning and Budget. And then before that, we worked with Colorado State University. But this Association of School Boards and Great Ed Colorado have been doing this for the last 2 years, and they've really done a nice job. You know, obviously, given who they are, they're a little bit more focused on education funding, but they've really just created a great resource for the state of Colorado to learn about and engage on the budget. And so let me just give you a quick tour, and then I'm going to show you how meeting mode works. This item is school spending, and so the default number is 4.1 billion. If you click on this, you get a little bit of an explanation of that, and then it asks the question, what level of funding would you like to see for public schools in Colorado? And it's hard to know exactly with a big program like education. It's hard to know exactly what the right level of funding is, and so you know, sometimes people try to tag it to performance and outcomes. But given, you know, variations in population and school district size, et cetera, it's sort of a hard thing to do. And so what they've done is they've chosen to peg it to what's being spent elsewhere. And so if you click on this and you look at the current investment in Colorado, it gives you some information. You can click on this and get some more details on it. And then you can decide, well, I'd like to keep the current investment, or you could say, well, I'd like to maybe learn a little bit more. I'd like to learn about the national average. And so if you click on that, you find out that the national average is 12,156, and you can click here to get more info. And you say, well, that, you know, that's quite a bit more. Let me look at another one. Let me look at the worst performing state. And you find out that Nevada ranks last place in Education Week's Quality Counts report, and then you can click here and get more information. And so let's just say that you wanted Colorado to, well, let's look at a more realistic option. Let's look at restore to pre-recessionary levels. And you find out that after being adjusted for inflation, that the per pupil spending should be 8,385. Now this is education spending, like a lot of items, took a pretty big hit during the Great Recession of 2008 and 2009, and so this would essentially restore it to what it was before the recession. So let's go ahead and see what that impact might be. Let's look at the national average impact. We find out that it adds $2.3 billion of spending, and it puts the budget into deficit by $2.3 billion. If we went to the worst performing state, it just tells you that that there are some constitutional provisions that require a certain level of spending. So you can just go ahead and note that, and then make a change. You've decreased spending by $884 million. What if we just went with sort of the more modest one? Let's restore to pre-recessionary levels. That adds $828 million, and so say, okay, you know, I know that we need to deal with that deficit, but let's go ahead and give that a shot anyway. So we're going to submit the category, get a nice little green check mark there, and then you say, well, what else would I like to look at? And just for the heck of it, let's go ahead and look at public safety, and I'm going to go ahead and say prisons. We'll learn a little bit about prisons, see a little bit more detail on that, and close it. So if I increase it a little bit, we see it registers the amount right here. It goes up by 1%. And then if you look at education and treatment for inmates, let's go ahead and decrease that. And so what I'd like to do now is I want to show you the idea with meeting mode is that your participants would each get a URL and that they would see this screen on their own device. But then what you would be doing is you'd be projecting what we call the facilitator screen. So the facilitator screen, I put it in a different color window. It's got the dark color on the top here. It is actually keeping a running tally of what people in the meeting have been saying. And so if we open up schools, for example, and I've used this sample before, so that's why there's more than one response here. But it tells you how people have responded. And so it says one person chose the current investment. National average was chosen by one user. Best performing by one user. Restoring to pre-recessionary levels, one user. Excuse me. Then if you go down here to prisons, you can see what people have indicated there and see people are saying on a different type of format. So if we go back over here and we look on the revenue side, we can see that they've got a question about what should be the sales tax rate in Colorado. The starting rate, the current rate, and the status quo is 2.9%, and they explain that pretty fully here. And then if we have about an $866 million budget deficit to make up, so let's go ahead and see what it would be like to raise the rate to 3.5% and to expand to include some services. And if you want more information on that, of course, you can look right here. And if we click on that, it gives you a warning that the Colorado Constitution requires a vote of the people. So once again, this is a situation where you really need to have a majority of voters saying that they approve of this, so that the need to engage them is very important. Let's say, let's go ahead and make that change. That brings in an additional $1.1 billion of revenue, and so we'll go ahead and submit that, and then we can go over to the facilitator screen and see how that's been going. So the average of all users is a 3.62% rate, raising an average of $803 million. In this particular case, the budget is still in deficit, and so in order to have a budget that looks something like this, people would need to continue to submit. So that's essentially how Balancing Act works. Let me now go back to the presentation, and I was going to give you a quick little tutorial on how to set it up. So let me go back here, and this is my my sandbox. This is just a demo account that I created, and I use simple numbers. But let's just say that right now I've got this budget called Demo that's active. So I'm going to go over here to Meetings, and it just there's an opportunity. It says you do not have any meetings, so click Create a Meeting to have one. And so then I'm going to call this Test for a Webinar. You have the option, you can put these things in if you want. And then you have, by default, it says use entire budget. That means, just like the example we've been looking at, you see the same screen that is generally published on the internet when you go to the meeting URL, the URL just for meeting mode. But if you wanted to specialize a little bit and you don't have unlimited time in a meeting, and say, well, I'd just like people to go to property tax and take a look at the police department, and then it gives you some options down here. Then when you go to the facilitator screen, it gives you a URL here. That's the one that you give to the public, and you can shorten that. And then it also gives you a facilitator view. So if we take a look here, instead of having the entire budget and even having that donut chart, it's going to have me review these items first. So I'm going to have it increase the property tax rate just a little bit, and then I'm going to submit the category. And then if I go over here and say continue the full budget, it's going to say, oh, you forgot to fill out one or more categories. So they essentially become required items. You don't want to put too many on there, but if you want to, in the course of the meeting, if you want to sort of focus people's attention on a few items, it's a really good way to do that. And then they can, once they've responded to these other items, you can then, once that green check mark is there, then it says you can continue to the full budget. And so it says now you can go to the full budget, and then you're good to go. And so I'm going to go back now to, this is number 138. I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to say open the facilitator view, and now we should be able to see the changes that we made. So we made changes to the police department, and so we can see the responses that I just put in, and obviously if you had more people, that it would show the aggregate, it would show the number of people who decreased and increased with the median and the mode, and then the total over here. And then with sales tax, or no, it's property tax that we looked at, it shows what the average rate was. So it's just a really great way to actually have a conversation with people in real time, and to use, to frame it in a way that it's somewhat realistic. All right, so let's go back now to the PowerPoint presentation. And This is something that I'll email out to everybody, but it's got we've got 3 videos that will help you. So the first one up here is how to set up meeting mode, and in about 5 minutes it kind of takes you through the options that I just walked you through. The one on the right just sort of talks about what you can do with meeting mode, and then the one at the bottom, if you want, we created just a short video. It's about 1 minute long that you can show before meetings, so that people will be oriented about how to use about what Balancing Act is, and also how to use meeting mode. So it's just intended to be just a little tutorial that you can put on the screen and show participants at a meeting before they start. Okay, so that's it for my presentation. I'm just looking to see if there are any hands up. I'm not seeing any, but if there are any hands, please click the hand icon on your control panel, and if not, I will just go ahead and end after about 20 minutes and invite anybody who wants to learn more about Balancing Act or meeting mode or related taxpayer receipt apps to just give me a phone call. My name is Chris Adams. My phone number is 303-877-0111, or you can just shoot an email to chris@abalancingact.com, and that will go to me, and I'd be glad to help you with any questions that you have about how to use balancing, or how to use meeting mode, how to set it up, or how to interpret results. All right, I still don't see any hands up, so I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar and thank everybody for participating.